Ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to the Pranzata Podcast. I am your host, Andrea Pranzatelli, and this is episode number 56 on my podcast. Today is just going to be a solo episode. I didn't want to book any guests this week. I have a particularly busy week, but if you're new to this podcast, this is a podcast where I interview musicians and comedians from the New York, New Jersey, Philly area, and sometimes I just talk to myself or talk by myself talking to you guys, and that's what today is going to be. So if you're into this kind of thing, don't forget to hit subscribe, like, comment on anything I talk about. Normally I take questions and answers when I'm doing a solo podcast, but I kind of did this one very last minute this week, so I didn't have time to put up the question thing on Instagram. So I'm just going to kind of talk to you guys what's been on my mind the past week. I've got a lot on my mind, and this is kind of a good medium for me to share it with people, get it off my chest, and bounce ideas back and forth with some of my listeners and everything like that. So the first thing I want to say is the reason why I am so busy this week is because I'm actually a music teacher. I'm a piano and vocal teacher, and this is I'm going to be doing my first performance for my student recital ever since the pandemic. I haven't done it since the pandemic. So before 2020, I used to do them twice a year, and I haven't done it. So this is going to be the first one ever since, before 2020, before the pandemic hit. And I'm super nervous about it, super anxious about it. I want everything to go well. So I didn't really want to have anybody in the studio this week because I knew I wouldn't really be able to be a good host. My mind would be too preoccupied with other things. So I didn't want to, I didn't want to torture them with being on the podcast and me not really paying attention to them or asking any interesting questions because I would kind of be too in my own head. So I'm going to wait till next week to have a guest booked on. But, once this recital is over, my mind is going to be a lot more clear. I think it's going to go well. It's just that it's been so long since I've done it. Most of these students I haven't even seen in person for a long time. Funny, even though schools are opening up and people are doing things back in person, I would say 80 to 85% of my students actually preferred to stay online for the lessons, I guess, because of the convenience of it and everything like that. Totally makes sense. I kind of like it myself. I'm not going to lie. I do enjoy working from home. I like to, you guys know I like to work out, and I love to cook. So working from home, I don't always have lessons back to back. Sometimes I have some breaks, so it gives me an opportunity to do a quick workout or cook something. So I like working from home. But anyways, let's get into it. I just wanted to explain why I'm not having anybody in person this week. I'm just going to wait till next week to have a guest. So something that's been on my mind this week, which I find interesting, and I want to talk to you guys about it and see if you guys can relate in any way, or can agree or disagree. But so a couple years ago, actually, or I would say over a year ago, not a couple years ago, maybe like a year and a half ago or something like that, when I first started my podcast, I had a guest on, and still to this day, he's one of my favorite guests. His name is Honest Music. I probably talk about it all the time on this podcast because I just remember we had scheduled to have a podcast for 1 hour, and we ended up talking for 4 hours and splitting it up, and we did a live performance. It was just one of my favorite episodes. And looking back, I was a horrible podcast host. I didn't have, great skills as a podcaster, but I just remember being taken away by some of the things he had to say and how wise he was for his age. He was only maybe 23 or 24 years old, I want to say, maybe 25, something like that. But he was young, you know what I mean? He was in his young to mid 20s. And I remember he told me that he had some type of disability, some type of visual disability where he didn't have any peripheral vision. He only could see one thing at a time. He can only focus at one thing at a time. And because of that, he had a really difficult life. He couldn't drive, and, it made certain things complicated. He has a lot of anxiety issues, and, he needs assistance to get around and that type of thing because he doesn't have any peripheral vision. I don't know the name of what he has, but it's a thing. And I remember him explaining to me, I told him halfway through the podcast, I was like, you're so smart for somebody your age. And we kind of went into a conversation about how I thought he was very mature for his age and even more mature than me in many ways. And he was explaining to me how he thinks that his disability, because he sees things so differently than the majority of people, it gives him a whole different perspective. And, and also because of the struggles he's had in his life, it gave him a whole new perspective in which he kind of sees things differently. And actually being able to focus on one thing at a time opened his eyes to a lot of things that he felt a lot of kids his age couldn't see. And that made so much sense to me. But where I'm going with this is I'm referencing him because something that we had talked about on that podcast really stuck with me ever since he said it. And every now and then it kind of comes back up and I start thinking about it. And it's been on my mind a lot this week. So what we had talked about on that podcast, one topic we had was he was explaining to me that he's not so much religious anymore, but he used to be as a kid, and he went to, church and Bible study. I think he was involved in, I don't know exactly what religion, but either Catholic or Christian. And he was in some type of club where they had to study the Bible. So he had read the Bible a lot. And even though he said he's not so much a religious person today, he still remembers some of the things that he read in the Bible and really now granted, the Bible clearly isn't up to date, with society and politics and everything. There's a lot in the Bible that should be taken with a grain of salt, but regardless, that doesn't mean the entire thing is useless. And what my guest was explaining was that there were some gems that he carried with himself throughout his life that he still remembers. And one of the things he shared with me was that in the Bible it says that God is in all things. And at the time on the podcast, we had gotten into a conversation about video games and games in general, not just video games, but just games, and we were kind of making parallels about games and real life. And what I'm getting at with this is that we got into a conversation about Super Mario or something. We were talking about Super Mario, and we were explaining how there are a lot of things built within games and video games in particular where this is so hard to put in words. I don't even know how to put this in words. Okay. So basically, when you play video games, it's very much a puzzle. Like it's very much a brain puzzle. You have to figure things out. You have to figure puzzles out, problem solve. You have to solve problems. And then once you commit to solving the problems, you then develop a skill that you can then carry with you for the rest of the video game, that will help you later on in the game. But from the beginning, there's a lot of problem solving and there's levels. You have to beat levels. You know what I mean? Like, okay, you've learned this skill. Now you can level up and you're going to carry this skill with you to the next level. And what I'm trying to get out here is that we were talking about on the podcast how that the idea of getting these skills and learning these golden truths of knowledge helps you level up to the next thing, and how that is parallel to life itself. And I've really been, for some reason, I don't know if I'm explaining it correctly, but he actually had a word for it. It was called gamification. I'm actually going to look this up right now. And I'm going to get into why this has been on my mind lately. I'm going to look up gamification and see if a definition comes up. Okay, gamification, the applications of typical elements of game playing, competition with others. Oh, this sounds horrible. It says the application of typical elements of game playing to other areas of activity, typically as an online marketing technique to encourage engagement with a product or service. Okay, that's not what I'm trying to say. never mind, forget that. That sounds like a marketing technique, but we had talked about the word gamification. But what I'm trying to say is that we made this intense parallel to game playing or video games and real life, and how there are so many parallels to something like Super Mario with real life. And just like a game, in life you learn these little nuggets of truth, and you develop these skills that will then take you to the next level of your life. Now, there's a lot of questions about this that I have with myself, or like I'm kind of debating in my head some of these things. First of all, that would be under the assumption that one of the purposes in life is to reach some type of goal, or win some type of game in some type of way. If you're of the belief that if you're more of a nihilistic, if you have more of nihilistic types of beliefs, and you kind of believe, well, there really is no purpose to any of this, then I guess nothing I'm saying would make any sense. I think this would only make sense if you're of the belief that there is some type of purpose and there's some type of journey to life. And I'm not 100% sure myself about the answer to that. What is the purpose of life? I don't know if anybody really knows that. But what I am saying is that for some reason right now in my life, I am thinking of life as a game, and that there's some type of purpose and some type of goal to attain, some type of answer to be found, some type of journey to be had, some type of quest to be completed. And what I'm noticing in like paralleling video games or games in general with real life is that just like in those games, you develop certain skills that will then take you to the next level, to conquer something and then get closer to the end goal. Just like that, in real life, I've been noticing there are sort of little gems of truth that I have been learning each year that will take me closer to where I want to be. For example, I had talked about previous on the podcast that something I had learned that I had never known before is that collaboration is more powerful than trying to do things alone. And that was not something I had known, my entire life. I had always kind of done things alone. So in the past year, that was, I would consider, a major nugget of knowledge that will then take me to the next level or the next stage of my life, so to speak. I can now bring that with me, that I am much happier and I feel much more fulfilled when I do things as a collaborative effort versus trying to do everything alone. That two heads are bigger than one, so to speak, or many heads are bigger than one. Community, effort. So that's something I learned that I don't think I could possibly thrive or get to the next part of my life without knowing that. Another example, something I've been learning recently, is the power of saying no to things. Now this will only make any sense if you view life as some type of journey with an indefinite purpose. And right now I feel like the journey I'm on right now is to find a way to survive doing the things that I want to do in life and helping others along the way. I would say if I could really break down my goals and my end, like what is beating my boss, if we're using the video games method, beating my boss would be finding a way to enjoy my life and to actually do the things that I want to do in life, and to feel financially stable and healthy doing them, and to love others and help others along the way. And believe it or not, I'm not doing a lot of those things. I'm doing the best I could. I mean, I am doing a lot of things that I enjoy, but I'm still trying to reach a point of financial stability, and I'm still trying to reach a point of being able to do more of the things I love more often, because right now I have very little time off and I don't get to do a lot of things that I love to do because I have to spend a lot of hours working. So in my mind, I'm like viewing this like a game, and it's like I'm kind of trapped in this level, and what I'm trapped in this level of life, and the ultimate goal is to escape this level and get to the next level. And one thing I got on a side tangent there, if I guess the reason I got on the side tangent is because, like I said, all of this will only make sense if you're viewing life as a game. And right now I'm viewing my life as a game. The only way I'm going to now beat this level that I'm in is by learning to say no to more things. Because the thing is, once you start developing skills, you then start to have value. And then when you start to have value, more and more people notice that and need you for things. And what ends up happening is that at first you feel like, oh my God, I'm valuable and people need me. I'm going to say yes to this, and I'm going to say yes to this, and I'm going to say yes to this, because that's going to lead to happiness, because these are the things that I want to do. But what ends up happening at this level, or at this phase of the game, so to speak, what ends up happening is you have value, but you don't realize that your value, you end up taking on jobs and responsibilities that don't serve you in the long run. Okay, how could I explain this? If I can make an analogy, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and I don't remember exactly which comedian said this, but there was one comedian on his podcast who said that when he first started kind of like breaking through some success, and he started to become more noticed and become more in demand for his, acting skills, he was offered a decent amount of money to do a commercial for, it was something like, it was like toothpaste or toilet paper or something like that. And he got offered a decent amount of money to do it, but then he had to take a step back and he had to say, wait a second, I'm going to turn this down, because even though this is offering me a lot of money right now, in the grand scheme of things, I'm now going to be the toilet paper guy. So it's just kind of a silly comparison to what I'm trying to explain to you guys. I'm at that phase of my life right now where it's like I'm just breaking into figuring out how to use my skills in life and in the world, but I'm getting a lot of offers for things that will throw me off track and make it so that I don't realize my end goals, and by the way, that's not to say that a lot of my end goals should be selfish either. I don't think that it's a bad thing to help people and to go out of your way to do projects and things for people for a lower price, or, for charity. I think all that's great. But I love this reference. I heard this on the Whitney Cummings podcast, actually, and I'm sure she didn't make it up, but she was referencing it from somewhere else, where she said that she always remembers that when you're on an airplane, the first thing the tutorial that they give you, if the plane were to crash or whatever, they say the first thing you're supposed to do is put on your mask first before you try to help anybody else. And she always remembers that when she feels like she's taking on too many responsibilities. And I love that, because that's exactly what I'm trying to say. It's not that you shouldn't do charitable things and you shouldn't help people, but there's only so much you have to give. And if you continue to do everything for everybody else and not think of yourself at all, well, then you don't have that mask on. You don't really have anything to give at that point. And you're not going to be even doing a good job. You're not even going to be doing a good service if you're miserable. You know what I mean? If you're miserable trying to help others, then you're not. What are you actually doing? What good are you actually doing? You need to help yourself first before you can help others. And then when you get to a point in your life where you're able to then take care of yourself and stabilize yourself, well, then you will have more time to donate more of your time or donate more of your money or whatever it is. But if you don't even have time or money for yourself, you shouldn't be saying yes to everything that comes your way, and you shouldn't feel guilty about that, So that's a nugget of truth I've been really learning the past couple months in particular. And if I could explain it in more detail, again, my end goal is I want to find a way to live my life the way I want to live it. And I want to have, and it's really, pretty simple. I just want financial stability. And I want to spend more time creating. And in order to spend more time creating, creating comedy and creating original music, I need financial stability. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like this vicious loop. It's like, well, I want to create, but I need financial stability, and I can't create because I don't have financial stability and I'm working all the time. So it's like, okay, how do I beat this? How do I beat this level in this game? Like, how do I get to a point where I have enough financial stability to free up time to do the things I want to do in my life? And I realize, and now I'm going to reference another thing that I read recently. What I read recently is that if you want to get money for the things you want to do, a lot of people kind of look at it from the wrong angle. They start by saying, I need enough money and then I can do the things that I want to do. But it's actually the opposite way around. You have to start by doing the things that you want to do, and then the money will be attracted to you because you're doing the things that you want to do. That's kind of like, you have to put a lot of faith in that in order for that to work, but it makes perfect sense to me. So for example, I'm in a band right now, and we've been really working on trying to get ourselves on the ground, you know what I mean? Or off the ground. What's the right way to say? You know what I mean? Like off the ground running. Like we have a band, like we have rehearsals and we've established ourselves as a band, but we need to really kind of get the momentum going and start getting paid gigs, etc. Which we have in the beginning, but we haven't really gotten any that we think we haven't gotten paid gigs that we think we're worth, or enough that's gonna help us reach our long-term goals. So right now, all I want to do is just sit down and really focus on getting this band together and marketing it and doing all those types of things. And the thing that's been stopping me from really focusing on it is time. Because I keep getting these offers to do other little gigs that pay just a little bit. Like, hey, do you want to fill in for this band? It'll pay X amount. Or hey, do you want to host this comedy event? And in the short term, I'm like, oh my God, these are all good things. These are all great things for my career. They all look good, like I'm getting experience. But then after months and months of saying yes to all these things, at the end of the day, I have no time left to do the band stuff that's going to lead to the long-term goal. So I guess what I'm getting at here is that this is if you view life as a game and you kind of collect little skills and bits of knowledge along the way. One skill I'm learning right now is that you have to say no to things in order to sometimes you have to say no to things that you actually think might be good. Like you sometimes you have, like there's sometimes there's things in life that for sure, like, I can't do this. I have to say no to this. Like, this is a waste of my time, in your heart. But there's actually sometimes things in life that you're not really sure. Like, you're like, damn, should I? It's kind of like a game of chess. Again, game. Like, it's kind of like a game of chess. It's like, well, if I do this, where will this lead me? Will this benefit me in the long run? Sometimes you have to kind of make a decision of what things could get you to that next level in your life, and I'm totally in that phase right now where I'm like, shit, I've been saying yes to way too many things the past year, and because of that, I haven't been able to stay on focus and have a rhythm going with the things that are actually going to get me to where I need to go, so yeah, games, again, not everybody's going to view their life that way. Not everybody's going to see life as a game, especially if you're more of the nihilist mindset. And I know that I attract nihilists on this podcast. I've had a lot of people tell me that they were nihilists. So if you are, the idea of life being a game probably doesn't work for you. You know what I mean? But I don't know. I think I'm a little bit more of a romantic soul. I like to put meaning to things, it makes me feel good to have meaning to things. And that has been something totally on my mind right now, is viewing life of the perspective as if it's some type of video game. And I'm going to include a link below of a podcast clip from that guy I was talking about, that we talked about, comparing Mario and video games with life. I'm going to include a link to that below, because I think he explains it a lot better than I did in this entire podcast. And because I thought it was so interesting, and it really stuck with me. And it's something I think about a lot now, where I'm just like, it's so helpful to view life from the perspective of it being some type of game that you have to conquer. I mean, I don't know. I could be completely wrong. But I just like that idea that God, like my friend said, God is in all things, including games. Everything that exists here has some element. Everything that possibly exists that was man-made on this earth was made by man. Therefore, it has the elements of man in it. So something like a video game would have some type of spiritual essence to it, because it was made under the influence of man, and I believe that man or a woman, but you know what I'm saying. I believe that human beings are spiritual. So why wouldn't a game created by human beings possess some sort of spiritual elements to it in order for it to be relatable to humans? I don't know if I'm making any sense, or if anybody has had the similar thoughts or can understand what I'm talking about, but I don't even know if I'm articulating it clearly, but I hope I am, because it's a very interesting concept to me. And as I learn more about it and figure out how to explain it better, I will probably talk about it more, or maybe even invite that guest back on again. He was supposed to come, but he couldn't make it for some reason, but I'm going to see if I can reschedule with him, and we can kind of talk about it more, because he explains it a lot better than I could. Anyways, I wanted to talk about that. I don't want to keep this podcast very long today, because I have a lot to do. So I'm just going to end with another talk. So I remember the last year I took you guys on a journey with me, trying to figure out where I'm going to move. I remember at first I talked about moving to Austin, Texas, because there was a booming comedy scene there. Well, I don't want to say booming, but there was the talk about a booming comedy scene there. For those, I'm sure you guys know, Joe Rogan, who I'm a huge fan of, had moved from LA to Austin, and he got signed a deal with Spotify, and he made a lot of money off of that deal. So one of his goals was to use that money and invest it in a comedy club in Austin, with the intention of having a thriving comedy scene in Austin, which there already was a comedy scene in Austin. But he wanted to make it even bigger. It was his dream to have Austin be a comedy. I don't want to say Comedy Central, because that's the name of a TV network, but you know what I'm trying to say, like a center. I'm trying to think of the word, but I can't think of it. What's the word? You guys tell me in the comment section. What's the word for like a hub? That's what I'm trying to think of. He wanted to make it a pretty heavy comedy hub, and he kind of already did start to do that, because once he started talking about building his comedy club, a lot of comedians started moving there. So anyways, long story short, my mindset was that I kind of wanted to join the bandwagon of helping that city grow, as a thriving arts community, because they already are an established music community, and now in the making comedy, community. I did go to visit it. I liked it, but I had to be honest. I have to be honest. I didn't love it. It wasn't really what how do I explain it? It wasn't really what I thought it would be. Like when I heard that it was a city, I pictured like something like New York City. Like I literally pictured like a city with subways. Austin, Texas is very, very spread out. And I don't mean to talk shit about Austin, Texas, because there were a lot of things about it that I really liked, actually. But it just wasn't really what I had in mind as a city. I felt like there was more so certain places it was definitely a driving city, let's just put it that way. It's not a place you can just walk around and on every corner do something. You do have to drive around to find the things you're looking for. And one thing I was actually particularly turned off by Austin was that it wasn't quite the music capital that I thought it would be. I had heard that it was super like a musical hub, and I just personally found that there, compared to New York City, there really wasn't much musically there. And maybe that's just me being a music snob, but I know that I'm definitely a far better musician than I am a comedian. So for me to make a move like that across the country to help build a community, a comedy community in particular, there needs to also be a thriving musical community there, or else it's not good for me. So really, I wanted to move there, and I was trying to save up the money to move there. And what had happened was, in the process of trying to save up the money to move to Austin, I had started doing comedy in New York City and doing gigs in New York City. And then in my heart, I was like, I actually like, even though my mind was like Austin, my heart felt that New York was better, you know? So then I kind of gave up on the idea of Austin, and my mind had then shifted to New York City. So then the next year rolled along, and again, my goal was to move 2 years ago, and I'm still living in New Jersey, but the next year rolled along, and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to New York. And that was my goal for that year. And by year, I mean lease year, like when I leased my apartment. So then the next year came along, and I was having such serious financial issues that I realized I can't afford to live in New York City. And I really had to weigh everything out. Here's the thing. I could afford to live in New York City, but the only way it would work would be if I lived in a house full of lots of people. That's the only way it would work. And I don't want to do that, you know? I don't mind having a roommate. I have a roommate now, and I'm actually very happy. We're very happy together. We get along really well. We vibe very well together, and my quality of life is very good with her. But I was very nervous about getting a roommate. And the reason for that is because I'm a musician. I teach lessons, you know, in my house. Like I have kids coming over all the time, you know. I do virtual lessons. I have to sing. I have to play piano. I have to practice. I have a live podcast in my house. I cook constantly. I'm like working out, lifting weights. And like, I just feel like, I'm a very respectful person. I'm a very clean person, but I do feel like my lifestyle could like I'm having like a studio and a whole business like run out of my apartment. I do feel like my lifestyle could really bother people. And then on top of that, I have 2 cats as well. So I just feel like I'm not going to be the easiest roommate. So right now I feel super lucky that my roommate and I get along. But honestly, I think part of that is because she knows I'm leaving in 6 months. I'm not sure if she would put up with all the stuff I do for life. She probably would get annoyed with me doing a podcast in here forever. Like at some point, I'm sure if we had lived together for a long time, I'm sure at some point she would probably expect me to rent a studio elsewhere or whatever. So going back to the New York thing, it was a dream of mine to move to New York. But then I just couldn't, the next year lease came by, and I couldn't make it financially. And if I can't afford to live alone in New Jersey, then how would I ever afford to live alone in New York? And then I had the realization too that even if I did find a studio apartment that I could afford, I would have to work constantly in order to afford to live there. So the end result would be, I would be in New York City appearing like I was living the dream, but I would be working constantly, and I'd be miserable, and I'd be lonely, you know? So, and I wouldn't have any time for music I wouldn't have any time for music or comedy or anything. So I was like, all right, this isn't looking too good. If I'm going to do New York, the only way it's going to be possible for me is if I live with a house full of people. And that's very risky considering all the things that I want to do. And not only that, but like I have a car and it's financed. I'm financing my car and I have to pay this car off for the next few years. And how the hell am I going to have a car in New York City? You know, even in Brooklyn, you know, it's not easy. And oh, by the way, that's the other thing. People would say, oh, move to Brooklyn. Brooklyn is a 40-minute commute to Manhattan. And like, I want to be near, if I was to live in New York City, I would want to be near Manhattan so I can go to the comedy clubs and get gigs and stuff like that. Yes, there is a lifestyle in Brooklyn as well, but all the things that I wanted to do were in Manhattan. Like all the certain clubs I wanted to go to were in Manhattan. So what the fuck would be I'm sorry, I don't mean to be nasty, but in my eyes, I was like, what the fuck is the point of living in Brooklyn if you still have to commute 40 minutes to get to Manhattan? Like, I might as well live where I'm living now in Somerville. It's only an hour and 15 minutes commute to drive to New York City. So at that point, it's like, what the hell is the difference? I don't see the point of living. I don't see the point of living in Manhattan unless you're like in a 20-minute drive of it. And otherwise, what's the point? So now, where are we going with this? I do want to move out of Somerville. It is my dream to live, you know, at least close to a city, if not in a city. The band I'm in is, one of the members lives in Philly and the other member lives very close to Philly. Two of the members live very close to Philly and one lives right in Philly. So there's that one. Two, I'm dating a guy who now lives who's actually in the band, but I'm dating a guy who's one of them that lives outside Philly. So there's already that. Like, I already have a whole life like near Philly. So one. Two, Philly is, I was looking up apartments in Philly recently, and I saw some offers for a studio apartment in Philly, studios and 1-bedrooms, by the way. So some studios, some 1-bedrooms. There's apartments in Philadelphia for cheaper than what I'm paying to have a roommate in New Jersey. Like, you can get like $600 or $700 a month with all utilities included. Internet, water, heat, everything for $700 a month. So if I wanted to live alone in Philly, it would be super easy. It would actually be cheaper than what I'm splitting right now. And it would be by the way, here's the other thing. Not to mention, I didn't mention this before about New York City. If I wanted to live in New York City, even if I wanted to live like close to New York City, even if I lived in a house full of people, it would still be like $1,000 a person to split the rent because it's so expensive around there. To split the rent, by the way. So like I said, in Philly, which is kind of close to what I'm paying now in New Jersey to split the rent. I'm just going to be 100% honest with you guys. I did the math, and I think once you add in all the utilities, once you do the rent and add in all the utilities, for me to have a roommate, I'm paying about $900 a month. Like once you factor in utilities, not like, so the rent is way cheaper to split with her, but like factoring in the internet, factoring in the water, all that, I'm paying about $900 a month, and which wouldn't be that far off to if I split roommates with New York City. It would probably be around at least $800, to split that. But what I'm saying is, in Philly, you can get an apartment with all the utilities included for like $700, which is insane to me. So I could be living for cheaper than what I'm living now and still live by myself. And now if I really wanted to go the roommate route, if I really did want to like take the gamble on a roommate, imagine how cheap that would be. I could live life for like $400 a month, like all utilities included and everything. That would be fucking insane. So anyways, I'm just like, I'm sorry I took everybody on this journey with me. I want you to understand that I am a person who really does like to do. I am a woman of my word. So it was kind of embarrassing and painful for me to go through that publicly, where I'm like, I'm going to go here and it didn't happen. I just want to clarify that it's not that I like pussied out or chickened out. It's because I literally didn't have the money. Like in 2000, when I decided I wanted to move to Austin, if I had money in my pocket, I'm a very impulsive person, and I would have been there like that day. That's how I am. I've always been that way. I'm a doer. I like to do things. But the only thing that was holding me back from the things I want to do was money. And there was nothing I could do about it. You know what I mean? Again, if I really was a doer and I really believed in the vision to go to Austin, what I would have had to do was get rid of everything, including probably, I guess I wouldn't have to get rid of my cats, but I would have to get rid of all my stuff. Like I would have to sell everything. Like I'd have to sell my couch, my bed, my keyboards, etc. And I didn't want to do that because the thing is, I like those things, and then I would have to find the money to just get all those things again. And so what? I would go to Austin with nothing, and then with nothing in my pocket, and then like no furniture, no anything, and then have to spend all my time working to like buy a bed again. Like that didn't make any sense to me either. That might be decent. If that actually would be a good plan if I was just going there to pursue comedy. That actually would be a smart thing, to just be like, hey, I'm here with nothing. I'm going to sleep on a couch until I make enough money. That would be fine. But as a musician with all this gear that I invested, like for my podcast and my stuff, no, I'm not going to sell all my gear and then have no gear left when I get there and then not be able to practice or make music or teach. That doesn't make any fucking sense. So if I was going to move to Austin, like I would have had to have the money to move my stuff, or else it wouldn't make sense. Now, New York is a different story because you can rent a van for, it's only an hour and something drive. So I could have been able to rent a van and get my stuff there for pretty cheap, I'm sure. But I guess what I'm trying to say is, I'm sorry guys for taking you guys on that confusing journey with me. I just want you to know that the only thing that stopped me from making those decisions was money. You know what I mean? Like in each one of those situations, it was money. Now, I'm planning to move to Philadelphia when this lease is over in October. Yeah, October 1st. So when you think about it, that's May, June, July, August, September. That's only 5 months left here in this lease. And I promise you guys, I am not taking you on another false journey. This plan is actually 100% doable. Like I have friends in Philly. I have a band in Philly. I have a boyfriend right outside of Philly. I can afford Philly. It's in my budget. It's cheaper than what I'm paying now. Like I am 100% in on it this time. And, it's totally doable. And not only that, but it's going back to those decisions I was trying to make about moving to New York City and Austin. Everything that I wanted out of those cities will be in Philly. One thing that was really holding me back from Philly was, a lot of people said that there was an amazing musical community in Philly, which again, that's perfect for me. But what I thought was that there wasn't a comedy scene in Philly. But I found out as I went along, and one of my friends was like, no, I've seen open mic things. And I was just like, I don't know. Like New York has always been known for having the comedy, you know what I mean? Like New York City comedy is usually what you think of. But I have a lot of friends from New York, and Philly and New Jersey that are like, no, dude, Philly is like popping with comedy right now. And I'm like, really? They're like, yeah, it's like seriously lit. Like there's open mics everywhere. There's a few comedy clubs booming. And then like a lot of people explained to me that nowadays, ever since the pandemic, that comedy has kind of dispersed out throughout the country, and that it's no longer New York City as the hub, that comedy is sort of like, there's comedy in all different cities now. Now I don't want to say all different cities because some not, but there's comedy in Austin, there's comedy there. Well, there's always been comedy in LA, but like Austin has a booming scene now, and like just other one like Boulder, Colorado, like just like random places that you wouldn't expect to have a comedy scene, are now booming with comedy because people moved out of New York City from the pandemic. So life is changing, you know? So I'm very happy and confident with this decision to move to Philly. Again, I promise this one isn't a hoax. Like I will be moving there. It's totally doable. It's in my budget. I can afford to do it. Worst case scenario, if God forbid I'm really that poor that I can't afford to move to Philly, I will then find roommates there. That would be not my preference, but I'll do that. But I'm pretty confident that I can get there without roommates. I can get there on my own, and I'm really excited for that. Anyways, this podcast I feel like went a little bit longer than I expected to, like it always does. I always think I'm going to just last 30 minutes and then I talk forever. But to finish things off, this is the Pranzata Podcast, episode number 55. No, what did I say before? Let me look it up really quick. 56. Pranzata Podcast, episode 56. I will leave a link below, 2 links below. One will be a podcast clip of that guest that I was talking about. We were talking about the Bible and like games and relating it to life. I'll leave a link to a short clip of him, and then I'll leave a link to the full, the episode was split into 4, but I'll leave you the one where we specifically talk about games and everything like that. So there'll be 2 links below where you can find him. And that's it. If you enjoyed yourself today, don't forget to hit like, don't forget to hit subscribe, don't forget all that stuff. And we will be back next week, hopefully with a live guest. If not, it'll be me solo again next week, and then you'll have a guest in 2 weeks. Have a good day, guys. Bye.